Welcome to the Volpe Report podcast, the state's premier public affairs show dedicated to the topics that matter most to Pennsylvanians. I'm your host, Chuck Volpe. Join us now as we speak to this week's guest.
The following half-hour show is a paid political program and is not endorsed by this station, management, or staff.
The following program is brought to you by Excalibur Insurance Management Services.
We welcome back to today's show, still newly minted, Republican United States Congressman from the 8th Congressional District, Congressman Rob Bresnahan. And we appreciate Rob's time because he literally just got back from Washington in what was a historic and chaotic week in Congress. Of course, we all saw the performance by the Democrats during President Donald Trump's State of the Union address. We also saw Congressman Al Green get physically removed from the chamber after he put on a disruptive, again, political performance art the Democrats have become more adept at than governing. And he was removed from that chamber. Of course, yesterday was the raucous and chaotic censure vote, and he was censured. That was, of course, Democratic Texas Congressman Al Green was the person I'm referring to. On tap for today's show, we will discuss this hysterical and unhinged response by the Democratic leaders, beside Al Green, in the House and the Senate, and their pathetic response to President Donald Trump's State of the Union address. I don't think I realize the bitter, unhinged hatred that Democrats in Congress have for Donald Trump, as well as the majority of Americans that voted them out of power. You remember the people they referred to as deplorables and garbage. It reminded me of the farewell address of disgraced President Richard Nixon after his resignation. At a luncheon he gave to say farewell to his White House staff that had served him so well. Right before he boarded that helicopter and waved farewell into history, he said something profound at that luncheon he had for his staff. What he said was that, and I'm quoting, that people may come to hate you, but those people don't win unless you hate them, and then you destroy yourself. Of course, he was speaking about his own career that he had destroyed. What we are watching now is the Democratic Party destroy itself in real time.
This is the Volpe Report, a weekly news and political interview show examining the latest local, state, and national issues with Chuck Volpe. Insightful, informative, controversial, the area's premier political talk show, the Volpe Report.
Congressman, welcome back so soon to the Volpe Report.
Well, Chuck, thank you for having me back. Always love being on.
Well, let me tell you what, it wasn't planned because and we did, I thought, a very good show just a couple short weeks ago, getting kind of taking the temperature of Washington, getting your comments on what was breaking before us. You know, it was like a daily protest by Democrats in the streets. That was all going on. I call it Democratic political performance art. But so that was a good show, not to mention the legislation you're working on in your first 100 days. But I called you back, and I appreciate you making time because the entire country watched what, as you and I talked off camera, what will always be the State of the Union address for me. I've been watching it for most of my life, and once you get to a half a century in anything, it kind of vests. And all of a sudden, I guess I am showing my age, not keeping up with the times, Rob, because somewhere along the line, someone decided, no, probably progressives, they like to change everything, not for the better, just to change it. Now we refer to it as the address to the Joint Chamber of Commerce.
The joint address.
The joint, yeah, right, joint session of Congress. Well, it's the State of the Union to me. So during President Trump's State of the Union, which you were present at, again, I'm going to turn it over to you. You were in the room, so describe the feelings, get through some of his speech, and the performance of the Democrats, and I'll comment.
Well, I'm glad you made reference to how frequently the weather changes in Washington, D.C., even though we just did a show a few weeks ago. And, there's a lot happening every single day. There is something new. But obviously, first I have to say how surreal it was for a freshman member of Congress, someone that had only gone to Washington, D.C. on a field trip before deciding to pursue this office and now getting to serve. I mean, I'm still walking around this place with the tourist version of the map half the time, finding out where new bathrooms are. But to be on the House floor during that moment, it didn't take long for specifically Representative Al Green to totally come unglued. And, actually, I have to talk about Al Green. A couple times I've been asked to preside over the special orders on the House floor. Both of my times have been on flyout days, and Representative Green always takes the 1 hour slot for the Democrats, where he gets up at the lectern and pontificates about all the injustice in the world and how everything is wrong. And you know what, how he's actually a really nice guy off the floor. He'll always stop over at the rostrum and thank us for, taking the time to be there. But his display was exactly what he wanted to happen. He wanted to be that martyr. He wanted to truly be disruptive, make a scene, so then he can go on camera. And then during the censor vote that took place just yesterday, I mean, and that'll be part 2 of this conversation, because I was sitting second row. He was sitting behind me. If you look at any of the news feeds, you'll see my head sitting next to Ryan McKenzie on the second row. But, the Democrats did not even stand up once when the president acknowledged DJ, a 13-year-old boy that beat brain cancer, that wanted to become a police officer, where we actually celebrated law enforcement, something that all of our local police departments are suffering from, and lack of recruitment. And why would people want to go be a police officer in this day and age? And for the president to acknowledge and actually respect police officers was something that was really exciting and encouraging for me to see. But for not so much as a clap, even a golf clap, to commend DJ, who survived and was given the honorary Secret Service officer designation. I mean, it was just disheartening. Not once, and now with the paddles, and
it was a make-a-wish moment, Rob. It was a make-a-wish, and as I said in the ad, all over the papers here that cover our whole region down to central Pennsylvania, there are certain things you would think aren't partisan issues. They're American issues. They're American values. The State of the Union has historically, from time immemorial, presidents of both parties, despite the raucous disagreements that always existed, that didn't matter who was in the majority, sometimes the Republicans, sometimes the Democrats. We've had Democrat and Republican presidents. But there are always points in the State of the Union speech that are the highlights, where you call upon our better angels and what unites us: courage, valor, virtue, overcoming obstacles, having suffered grievous office, laying down your life for others, things that used to be celebratory. How do you sit stone-faced during those moments? You have to be a lower form of order. That's your stage. So the young boy who's had 6 brain surgeries and still sits there, the officer that went into a burning building to save a child, the ones that laid down their life for their citizens. And how do you not stand up united for the values of this country, to stand with that family, to stand with them? And they sat there stone-faced. Have they completely just gone crazy? I know collectively.
If that was even if that was President Joe Biden, and I kind of try to put myself in the shoes of if it was inverted or a different way around. And if Kamala Harris hypothetically was to have been our president, and she was to recognize a Border Patrol agent or a school teacher for doing something heroic, I would have stood up. And you're looking at a Border Patrol agent who took fire to protect one of his fellow Border Patrol officers, Laken Riley's family, who was murdered by an illegal alien. I mean, these people could not even be bothered. And what they did is they had whiteboards and they wrote, all the perils of the universe on them. It's just a very basic form of decency that I would like to believe, or class, perhaps. And, I'm glad and this is something that I saw firsthand during the censor vote of Al Green yesterday. And I was sitting there, I was about to give a floor speech about the Wyoming Valley Children's Association on their Cooking for a Cause event. and I never even got a chance to do it because chaos ensued. It started off with, as Al was getting censored, and other Democrats had walked up and locked arms about, basically standing alongside of Al Green. Now, listen, I understand people get excited, things happen, take it, move on. But then the provocation of the Democrats, I mean, they started actually shouting at, I was sitting next to Ryan McKenzie, and they started shouting at Ryan McKenzie, and Ryan McKenzie started, arguing back about rules to the floor and respect. And then they brought me into it. I was just sitting there waiting to give a floor speech about the Wyoming Valley Children's Association, so much that another member had to come down and actually intervene. And then they shouted at him for standing incorrectly. And, I saw it. And I was never a person to say, oh, Democrats or, Republicans. But I mean, it was just, and I can't say that because 10 Democrats also felt that Representative Al Green was out of line. And, he did that as a spectacle with his cane, shouting, screaming, just for the attention. And, as that martyr, so we could talk to people. And again, it was about Medicaid, something that we haven't cut. Nothing has been done. The resolution process is 87 pages. There's not one reference to Medicaid anywhere. And if it was a vote to actually cancel Medicaid, we would not have been supporting that. So it's very clear. But I mean, it was almost like they were looking for a fight. They wanted to get that camera time where, someone disagreed with them, and they were screaming about some kind of assault that took place on the House floor. I mean, it was unlike anything I've ever been a part of.
I'm going to say probably not anything like really this country has ever seen in the modern era. I know back in the Civil War days, I mean, I think there were murders committed by one congressman against another back in those halcyon days. But yeah, you're speaking to that issue. And I think obviously American citizens are disgusted by what they saw. They continue to be. I'm sitting there trying to think, from my political experiences, and I've had my exposure to some of the best political consultants from Washington. Like the commercials that they are making for the Republicans. They're making their commercials. I've heard a couple of Democratic analysts on CNN, not exactly a fair and neutral station, very pro-left and Democrat. This one, a black woman, analyst, I can't remember her name, not Joy Reid, everybody knows who she is, but basically say, I think she was ashamed of her own party. And she said, I want to say that the 2026 midterms are over. We've lost them already because of the performance art that continues to go on. And the fact that other than yell and say how much they hate Trump and the Republicans generally, Rob, they still have yet to, one, coalesce around a message, coalesce around who's in charge of the party. I liken it to chickens with their head cut off. They're dead. They haven't keeled over yet. And, so you hear I think United States Senator Fetterman, John Fetterman said he was embarrassed.
Summed it up perfectly.
He said, what are we doing? How do you not stand up for a little boy who's had 6 brain surgeries and to want to even be like more disgusting? Then there's Rachel Maddow on MS. I'm going to steal what the attribution to Sean Hannity. He calls it MSDNC, which is pretty much what it is, right?
Doesn't seem incorrect.
Well, how about her? She referred to that moment when he made, in the joy in that little boy's face, and you're all clapping and cheering. And so was everybody at home in America, including me. People had tears in their eyes at that moment. She refers to that, I'm using her word, it was disgusting. Rachel Maddow, disgusting. And then, I've heard of Trump derangement syndrome, Rob. I never believed it. I thought, both parties put these monikers on the other party. But so I never really thought it was serious. I'm starting to believe it because you have to be mentally unhinged and delusional and deranged is the better word. She actually went on to say that what he was doing was using this boy, it was disgusting, to try to take credit for curing cancer. I don't know what do you say to that? I mean,
how do you rationalize with that? And you know what? It's reality. The fake, and I never was that kind of person to believe that until I saw with my own eyes yesterday what unfolded right in front of me on the House floor. And I mean, I just really picked a seat that was closest to the action, but to be accosted and called a fascist and, the worst things that you can call a innocent, I was, it was almost like the hands up, don't shoot movement, just sitting there and was accosted and by a purely deranged, progressive squad members from the left. And I was in it. I was in the belly of that beast. But you look at the ABCs, you look at the MSDNCs, like you called it. I mean, I'm going through it right now. They chose not to renew my fiance's contract, her anchor contract, with WNEP because of who she's choosing to marry. I'm living it right now. I mean, today is her last day.
Yeah, that's why. By the way, that's why I sit and very proudly in Fox Studios. There'd be nowhere else I would do my show. And again, so we're going to take a quick break and come back, Rob, and talk about some of the other events from that night and some of the other commentary, and then get into some of the legislation that's currently leaving the House. You're passing it and sending it to the Senate, and some of what's going on there. We'll be right back.
Great.
There are more places you can watch the Volpe Report, your premier political talk show. Tune in to Fox 56 every Sunday morning at 10:30 as we bring prominent national and state officials right into your living room. Or watch on YouTube at the Volpe Report, where you get full access to all of our episodes, wherever you are. Our guests are the newsmakers, the decision makers, the people who shape the policies that affect us all. We dive deep into what matters most to Pennsylvanians with in-depth interviews that give you the full picture. We're dedicated to providing you with unfiltered, thought-provoking conversations. Whether it's local policy, national politics, or everything in between, we're right here to break it down and keep you informed. So wherever you want to watch, the Volpe Report is always here for you, delivering everything you need to know in today's political landscape.
Back here, Rob, and again, we're kind of still talking about what's gone on, and again, I'm kind of giving you some of my following of the various talk shows and political analysts that talk on these talk shows, and I do a broad spectrum, CNN, MSNBC, of course, Fox, and most of the dismay came from, of course, what the Republicans, the Laura Ingrams and the Sean Hannitys, the Jesse Waters, you knew what they were going to do. But what I was hearing from panels and Democrats was aghast, appalled. One said, I think we blew the midterms. One analyst actually said something that was Democratic analyst said something that's profound relative to what we talked about before about their messaging. If you can't stand with those people on those issues, who exactly do you stand with? And I thought about that analysis. I said, that is really profound because that does beg the question, who do you stand with? What values are you for? Is it hatred for America? It's an evil, systemically racist country? Is that the group, the squad, for example, you made reference to? Are those the people you stand with? But here's the thing the analysts concluded. Here's what you're not standing for. The overwhelming vast majority of Americans that vote in elections and that are watching this show. And I'm thinking, couldn't have said it better. Your comment.
The people that they stand for are the people that bully people in pharmacy drive-thrus in Coolbaugh Township and accost someone waiting to pick up prescription medication, and then bully them and suggest that are you a Trump voter? Kara Rogan from Coolbaugh Township, an elected official, acting like a total psychopath in the drive-through line. The same person that follows me around and smashes me day in and day out for trying to stand for what's right. That's what they stand for. The fact that you can't stand for someone that was injured in the line of fire, someone that was fighting for our country, a young boy, that's the hypocrisy here. Yeah. And what they tried to do is spin this into, this holier than thou that, we're telling you what's best for you. And I think the most recent election spoke very different about what the people of this country want. They want a secure border. They want an economy that works. They want safe communities. Everything, look at what's happening on the border. Record number, even lower than Trump's first term of illegal border crossings. They want fiscal responsibility. They are sick and tired of being put second. I said on my campaign trail, the golden goose is sick. It's going to stop laying golden eggs. We have to take care of America. And that's exactly what the administration is doing. That's exactly what House Republicans are doing. We have been given a mandate. We want to preserve the tax cuts so 40 million families don't lose the child tax care credit. So middle-class families don't have the highest increase in taxes in American history. I mean, these are our priorities that we're delivering for people.
Well said, Rob. I won't even add to that. The thought has occurred to me as this time has gone by, and not just this instance, but all the way back to being out in the streets and singing protest songs and all their other pathetic shenanigans. And a thought struck me. I'm a voracious reader of all political history. I love it. And I remember, it popped in my head as I was watching what was unfolding the other night. And I thought, the first thought I had, Rob, was that they must hate him, meaning President Donald Trump, so bad that it's blinded them to basic human decency and basic human understanding and basic human empathy. And then it popped in my head. All the reading I did, it just comes back at different times. Famously, after Richard Nixon resigned in 1974, he did so in the evening. I remember I was a 14-year-old boy watching the address. And, of course, the next day, Gerald Ford was sworn in as our next president, and he boarded that famous helicopter, gave the wave, and flew off into the future, his future. Right before he boarded that helicopter, he had a farewell speech with the entire White House staff that had served him at that point for about 6 years. And it was a tearful speech, and it was a sad speech, as you would imagine. And he ended it with lines that have scored themselves into my memory. He said, after pausing and, acknowledging all the individuals in the room, he paused for a moment. He said, reflectively, these were his last words, effectively. He said, remember this. He said, people may hate you, but they don't win unless you hate them, and then you destroy yourself. And he was a living example of it. He destroyed himself. Well, that popped into my head, and you know what? I'm watching the Democratic Party in their hatred, their Trump derangement syndrome, destroy themselves and destroy the Democratic Party.
Well, it's happening right before our own eyes, and a broken clock is right twice a day.
Yeah.
And in their minds, under no circumstances has anything he done been okay. So I'm not sure where, somewhere, someplace, whether it's the paper straw ban. I mean, somewhere you'd like to believe that somewhere he's correct, but you're right. I think you phrased it perfectly.
So let's move forward now, Rob. We have legislation that you're passing, and I'd like to be updated on some current stuff that we need to talk about. But you send a bill over, which should be a no-brainer, to ban biological
biological men out of women's sports.
Exactly right. So, and you pass it. It passes the House. It goes to the Senate, and they use their filibuster power. Every single Democrat votes against that bill. Amazing.
And this is the most, this is like one of the least controversial pieces of legislation. And that's why the budget reconciliation process is going to be so important that we get this right. And that's why it's a very member-driven process, because this is our one opportunity to be able to pass meaningful change for the American people, like they gave us a mandate to do with a simple majority inside of the Senate.
Exactly right. And, I was, again, taken by the hypocrisy, Rob. Do you remember, I know you do, that for almost 4 years, how they screamed about, we have to end the filibuster. We have to end the filibuster in the Senate. Well, guess what? I wonder, it's crickets now. How come the Democrats aren't saying, yeah, you know what, Republicans, now you have interest to end the filibuster. Let's end this because it is the right thing to do for the American people. they're hanging on to that filibuster with like you're going to have to pull their cold dead hands off of it. Again,
It's
the
a double
hypocrisy.
standard. The wind changed directions, and now it's okay to think everything that we fought for doesn't make any sense any longer because it's their way or the highway. And I'm on Problem Solvers Caucus, no labels, and a big group of our Problem Solvers No Labels caucus members were part of the 10 that voted, including the vice chairman of Problem Solvers, Tom Swazi, voted to censor Al Green. And what does Al Green do? Says he's going to introduce legislation to impeach President Donald Trump. And that's why the 2026 midterms are so important, because every single week there's going to be a new article of impeachment presented to the House floor, and Donald Trump is going to be facing a litany of different cases.
The American people aren't going to have it, Rob.
Everything we said is correct here. We're going to continue to legislate. We're going to deliver wins for the American people. We're going to stay strong and do what's right.
And I know we're kind of running short in time, so let me get to this. We are approaching, I think, that debt ceiling cliff again, correct? It's coming up in March.
That is coming up next week.
Oh, well, it's even closer than I thought.
Very.
Any insight on how that's going to go? Look, they have mastered one thing the Democrats have got going. I said political performance art. We're going to see all kinds of crazy stuff. I'm sure you are next week. What do you think is going to happen on that? That you will be able to work that out?
One important thing about the debt ceiling is just because you raise the debt ceiling doesn't necessarily mean you're raising debt. Right. That's first and foremost. Secondly, there's been conversations about tying, in the Senate predominantly, tying debt ceiling raising to natural disaster relief. And the continuing resolution is most likely going to be the reality. We have not seen any context of what the CR will look like. I'm one of these governing Republicans, and I'm not a big believer in shutting everything down. I'm for a very responsible spending bill to make sure the critical elements of government continue to function the way that they are designed. But obviously, we're going to look at it, and we're going to see what kind of implications there could be and what it will look like comprehensively. But we have not seen any context. We are hoping to see it early this week, which is a little frustrating. If we're going to take a vote on Wednesday and we're going to have to dissect the 1,000-page document, we want to know what we're voting for. There's been conversations about doing a 1-year extension. There's been conversations inside of the Senate. But ultimately, this needs to pass the Senate as well. So there is going to need to be some bipartisan support on these issues. Right. I guess we'll wait and see. And like I said, the temperature change is pretty quick down here in Washington. So maybe next week, if you have another vacancy, I'll give you another.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, it's great to have you back so soon. I appreciate the time. And real quick, you were today was, I guess, Dr. Seuss Day. You were reading to school children.
It was.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about that.
I was refreshing my Cat in the Hat over here at Heights Elementary School in Hazleton, and doing some in-district work this week. Always love to get home. We finished up votes yesterday, got back to the district, and obviously I work in Washington, D.C., but my heart is here. So any opportunity that I can to be out in the community is something that I really look forward to.
Oh. It's been a pleasure having you on, Rob, and thanks again for making time. And thank you for taking Northeast and Central Pennsylvania, all of our citizens, into that chamber, because obviously we don't get to see all this stuff, and we had an eyewitness account. So thanks again. I'll talk to you soon.
Really appreciate you having me on.
Thanks for joining us for this edition of the Volpe Report podcast. Be sure to visit our YouTube and Facebook pages for upcoming episodes. You can catch up on the Volpe Report podcast on your favorite podcast provider.